Hey everyone, in today's video I want to give you all the information you need to know about trade tariffs, what they are and who actually pays them. And although maybe parts of this video may sound a little bit political at times, the truth of the matter is this store behind me here, this is my full-time gig that I've been running for 12 years. Not only that, I also have an online store. And in those 12 years, I've been importing almost on a weekly basis. So I know all the ins and outs about tariffs. So before we get into the details, I want to explain to you why tariffs are such a huge deal in 2025. Now, as you know, when Trump came back into office, he came through with his campaign promises of putting tariffs on countries all over the world, mostly due to trade deficits and other silly reasons. Now, what does it mean for my company, this store that I have behind you, and also my online store? Well, believe it or not, my company has actually thrived this year because of these tariffs. But it's not for the reasons you think. And you'll want to watch right to the end of this video so I can explain to you why I'm in a unique situation. Now an explanation on how tariffs are actually applied. Now there may be a lot of misconceptions out there as to who pays the tariff. Because, Trump is always saying that, he's put a tariff on this country or that country. Well, even if the roles were reversed, countries don't pay the tariffs. Companies in those countries pay the tariffs. And 99.9% of the time, it's the importing company that pays the tariff. So when I want to import something from China or India or the UK, if there's a tariff on it, I'm paying it. Now, how are tariffs calculated? Well, in the past, it's generally been gone by a list of trade codes. These are also known as harm codes. So what basically is happening, the government is saying, oh, you could have bought this product here locally, but you bought it overseas or you bought it from another country across the border. Therefore, we're going to put this harm code on there and we're going to charge you a tariff. Now, they would have different classifications. So maybe agriculture would be like 5%. Maybe steel and aluminum is 25%. Maybe electronics is 15%. But as you've probably heard through the news, Trump has put a lot of blanket tariffs on countries. You get 39%, you get 50%, you get 15%. So it's kind of crazy. But how the tariffs actually get applied is, so as an importer, at some point, product will come into the country. It'll either come by sea, so a seaport, or by an airport, or by a cross-border port. And then what happens is it goes right into customs holding. And then because I'm a regular importer, my company name will get flagged. And then that will go over to my importing broker. See, I have to have an importing broker since I do a regular importing. If you're just a single regular person and you just buy the odd thing, from another country, what will usually happen is the carrier will act as the importer. So if you get something coming in for yourself by UPS, they may act as the broker. And so what they'll do is they'll take a look at the commercial invoice attached to that shipment, and it'll say, this is the product, this is where the product originates from, it could be China or India or whatever, and this is the harm code that this product will be classified at. What they'll do is they will pay the government tax agency what they're owed for the tariff. And then they'll draw up an invoice and give it to you, the importer. So I get invoices every week from my importing broker. And it shows me all the breakdown with the brokerage charges and what the tariff rates if they apply. In some cases where we have free trade agreements, it might be zero. In other cases, it might be some particular rate. But the fact of the matter is, the importer, 99.9% of the time, will pay the tariff. Now, what could be a case where the exporter pays the tariff? Well, that's happened sometimes where, let's say, there's a very low price ticket item that they're selling in bulk. Let's say somebody in China says, okay, we'll sell this product that we charge 10 cents a piece. So if we sell 100 of these 10-cent items, well, we'll cover the tariff because there's still a lot of markup for them because things are so cheap to produce in China. But they don't mind paying just a little bit. But that very rarely happens. And like I said, that's usually when it's a very small ticket item, like we're talking pennies, really, when it comes right down to it. But on very large items, if it's anything to do with steel, aluminum, electronics, semiconductors, that kind of thing, there's no way that the exporter is ever going to cover the tariffs. It would be just too huge. So now to the part that I promised I was going to tell you about why my business is actually thriving in this type of situation. If you haven't guessed so far, you might see something in my window here. You might see a maple leaf there. My company's in Canada. So yes, we have some tariffs against countries around the world. China, some things can be 6.5%. I think the highest tariff rate I've ever seen on a bill is maybe 12.5%. But here's the thing. For so many years, I used to import most of my stuff from the US suppliers. And what's happened in the last 6 or 7 months is that this US supplier, they get their stuff from overseas, it gets tariffed. That company, that supplier in the United States, has to pay that tariff. So they have to raise all their prices, and now when they're selling to either people locally in the US or exporting it to, like I said, Canada, they have to raise the prices by 20, 25, 30%. Well, I'm looking at this as a Canadian importer and saying, well, wait a minute. I know they're getting this stuff from overseas. So I just do a little bit of Googling here and I go on a few different sites. And guess what? I see the actual product over there at a fraction of the price. And so I say, well, I'm going to buy from overseas. I am now avoiding buying a lot of stuff from the United States for no other reason than there's so much cost savings when I realize where I could have bought directly. And this is what's going to spell out a terrible situation for the United States, is that even if Trump backs down now from these tariffs, or at a later date, the Democrats get in and they say, well, okay, we're going to reverse all these huge, ridiculous tariffs. Well, I've already seen a huge price saving by buying direct overseas. What's going to be the incentive now going forward for me to buy from US suppliers? I mean, it's still going to be a lot more expensive, even without the tariffs. So this is why trade wars are horrible, because what you're doing is you're becoming isolationists. You know, the United States is saying we just want to isolate ourselves, and then other countries like Canada and the EU and Asia, we're all talking to each other and saying, how can we do business? And I hate to tell it to you, and I know I said at the beginning, I'm speaking as a business owner, an importer. There's my store again in the background, but I have to get political here. Yes, trade wars suck for everybody. So hopefully your local politicians can convince Trump to back off on these tariffs sooner rather than later. Maybe there can be some recovery. Maybe you can repair some of the damage that's already been done. But like I said, uh, trade wars, they suck. They suck for everybody, but they force other people who are being harmed to look at other trading partners. Anyway, I hope you learned something, the truth about tariffs, coming from someone who actually is an importer of 12 years. Thanks for watching.